Hey everybody, it is Tanner, Fresh Hour, Dr. Fresh Hour with the Fresh Start Initiative, and I'm doing another video log on obesity today. I was driving home and there was a podcast on. They said some things that got my brain moving a bit. So yeah, this video log is going to be about obesity and some of the articles that I found about it. So let's do this. First up, here is my website, startfreshmd.com, where a lot of the articles that I write out, which are not, like the all-inclusive articles that some people do, they're more just my opinion on a particular topic, and I give you some ideas of maybe what you should look at going forward if you would like to do your own research about them. I just kind of give you my basic opinion on them. The videos section where you can see, or click them down here, seeing in my previous videos, previous live streams. Here's my plans, testimonials, my mailing list, which I believe is finally set up, my live stream, which is every Saturday at 8 a.m. Eastern time, and so on. So let's dive into this. So basically, I went to healthline.com and I typed in obesity. So like any topic, we're going to talk about what it is. And obesity is usually, for the most part, based off of your BMI. And your BMI is really height, weight. There's modified versions of the BMI, but if your BMI is over 30, you're obese. Let's see, is associated with a higher risk for serious disease such as type 2 diabetes, heart rate disease, or heart disease. Yeah, obviously. So we'll talk about that too. Obesity is common. Thank you, CDC. 40+% of all Americans over 20 are obese. I think it's over 75% of Americans over 20 are overweight. But BMI isn't everything. And then so we start talking about what causes obesity, which we're going to talk about, who's at risk, and all this stuff. So 10 leading causes of weight gain and obesity. This lady is super, super confident. She wants to be featured in an obesity and willpower article. More power to you, lady. That's awesome. Let's see. Many people think that obesity and weight gain are caused by a lack of willpower. That's not entirely true. I'm going to stop right there and say that's very not true. Because for most people, the basic understanding and intuition that is involved around totally understanding why they are overweight or obese is just not there. Like, intuition is really great and cool, but sometimes you need to be taught how to think in a good way, not necessarily a bad way, I know. Some people might be like wondering, what are you putting into my brain? That's not the case. Just in regards to whenever you're eating or when you're eating, why you're eating, how you're eating, all of those variables or different facets and so forth. Once you tell people and give them some information, the way that they think and their body and their mind respond to that information or what they're doing, the whole ceremonial aspect of it, I don't think it takes willpower after you know all of those things, but unless you're, have a pretty good understanding of everything that's going on, willpower is not really that important. If you have all the willpower in the world, but you don't actually know what you're doing or how to do what you want to do or why you're doing it, it doesn't really do anything, in my opinion. And that might sound a little jaded, but like, willpower is huge, but you need to educate people. And I love starting off with genetics first and foremost. It does have a strong genetic component, but being that obesity and being overweight, which we'll talk about later, why it's trying to be classified as a disease, in reality, it's just a symptom of your lifestyle. And it's a symptom of what you do every day and have done every single day, and that other things in your life, nurture versus nature or nature versus nurture, play a role in it. So being genetically predisposed to obesity, I think there's been we love to have an excuse for the way something is. If we're late, very rarely is it our fault. It's the traffic, the accident that was there. It wasn't that we could have left a little sooner because nobody likes to sit and be way too early. But okay, I'll just stop that whole tangential nature of that thought. But let's just say this. So for genetics, if you are predisposed to being overweight, it just means that you have to be a little more careful. And a fun, interesting fact that might, I don't know, make you feel a little better, makes me feel better sometimes. Anytime you're genetically predisposed to something, a lot of the times that's because you have evolved, if you want to accept that word, or generationally passed down there's been some advantage to then create a disadvantage, because if we're all just in balance and nothing's really advantageous or a disadvantage, it doesn't really work that way because of the climates, cultures, what we eat, and what those activity levels, all kinds of stuff like that, right? So, because you might be a little more prone to being overweight based upon what you eat, I'm sure there's a handful of other genetic benefits that you have. Maybe you don't even know about, or we don't even haven't identified them yet, but that's kind of the way that we work. You don't really just evolve over time to be more susceptible to things that kill you without being less susceptible to something else that was more dangerous at some point in time. Moving on. Engineered junk foods. This is pretty straightforward. Even certain GMO fruits and vegetables are GMO'd, genetically modified, right? To be tastier than they should normally taste, like chicken nuggets from McDonald's will probably taste better than chicken nuggets that you make ever, unless you figure out exactly what they do. They take certain macronutrient profiles, which usually involve adding sugar to everything, vitamins and minerals to make you more thirsty, and then supply you with a massive Coke to wash it down. They figured out ways of suppressing satiety hormones and making your hunger hormone not work, which kind of does stop working uh, to a certain extent whenever you're overweight, same as your satiety hormone, or when you're full. So yeah, obviously they engineer junk foods, processed foods. Everyone has a pretty good idea about that. It's not really new information. Maybe sometimes you don't realize the extent of it. Food addiction. Yeah, sugar is basically like a drug. And they say right here, alcohol, cocaine, nicotine, and cannabis. I don't really necessarily believe that cannabis is super addicting. I feel like that if you are taking a cannabinoid of some type or something that hits those receptors and you have some addictive, it seems that you're addicted to it, you might be deficient in something that you are then treating, because cannabinoid receptors are throughout your entire body, which is why, in my opinion, some people have the most amazing benefits you could ever imagine from smoking weed or taking some type of oil or edible or whatever people want to market these days. But I do agree with the rest of these. Sugar is extremely addicting. But don't say that. Kellogg's doesn't want you to think that. Aggressive marketing. That's kind of obvious with everything. It's really hard to market broccoli sometimes. I feel like all the time, vegetables in cartoons when I was growing up used to get like such a horrible rap. Like, oh, my vegetables. It's like they didn't realize what they were going to do to an entire generation growing up. Insulin. Yeah, that'll definitely. Insulin and cortisol. Those are two hormones that no matter what you do, if you give them to somebody, eventually they'll be fat or obese. Same as thyroid. Take thyroid away, eventually they'll be overweight and obese. Medications, definitely, like insulin. Antidepressants for sure. Antipsychotics, definitely. Leptin resistance. This is really associated with obesity, but let's see. Yeah. Do you guys really need to know any of this? Well, okay, so leptin is your satiety hormone, tells you when you're full. If you have a resistance to the hormone that tells you when you're full, probably be able to eat more. And whenever you're obese or overweight, you've had so much food and you've been quote unquote hormonally full for so long that your body develops a resistance to it, like it does every other hormone. Food availability, first world problems, and the type of food available. If we had a broccoli, vegetable, meat, fish problem, well, probably would be overweight. Sugar is literally the most double-edged sword or two-sided coin that I like to talk about, because it's really not that bad. It's actually super cool the way it works. I don't like the way that we use it as people, humans. If we just removed sugar, you wouldn't die. If we remove fat and protein, you would die. Fun fact. And as much as people want to twist and turn, there's not really any essential sugars. It's really cool, actually. When you remove sugar from diet, a lot of vitamin and mineral deficiencies happen way later. Like the act of sugar metabolism of and processing it and all of that depletes vitamins. So whenever you fast, that's why those people aren't super vitamin and mineral deficient, as opposed to people who calorically restrict with still having sugar. Super cool, super cool, super cool. I don't like fructose. I think fructose is silly. Basically, your body has a few different pathways, these GLUT transporters that transport glucose. GLUT. And there's one very unique one that's specifically for fructose, and that's why fructose was in sports drinks, right? Because it's just another way to get sugar into your bloodstream, and sugar's for rapid energy. Kind of cool for athletes, but for everyday people, I think fructose, high fructose corn syrup, horrible. High fructose corn syrup leads to elevated levels of what is it, uric acid. Uric acid is associated with gout. Also, when uric acid is put into the mix of your adipose tissue, makes them do some very interesting things, like, really, really ramp them up. Misinformation. Holy crap. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Misinformation has been going on for a long time. Part of the reason why I'm doing this in the first place. So let's look at some obesity facts. More than 1/3 of adults in the United States are obese. This says 36, the other one said like 40, but obesity is almost like a little bit crazy. Once you're obese, like that should be in and of itself a huge wake-up call. But when you're overweight, that's the one where people are kind of like, am I overweight? I don't know. Am I big boned? I have a lot of muscle. Back in high school when I was playing JV football, yeah, I mean, I was a lineman, but I think being overweight is where the real debate is. Obesity is one of those things where it's really hard to look at somebody who's obese and say, I don't think so. I don't think you are. I think you're all right. What? But also, you take sumo wrestlers. Sumo wrestlers are obese, but they do such high intensity training. Their bone density is so great, and their muscles are all super fast twitch, explosive, and trained every day that they're not diabetic or really have a disease profile of other people while they're practicing sumo wrestling. Cool fact. 1 in 6 children in the United States are obese. More than 60 chronic diseases, probably a lot more than 60 chronic diseases. More likely to become overweight adults. Yes, extremely true. Extremely true. Used to have every now and then their kid would have a chubby face and stuff like that. Now it's like people just stay chubby. I think, I don't know how true this is now, but I know that when I was doing at one point, one of my clinical rotations, one of my doctors made the statement that children born today are the first generation in a very long time to have a lower life expectancy or shorter life expectancy than their parents. Weird, kind of sad. Your waist size increases your risk for diabetes. Yeah, and using a waist trimmer, which is the most horrible idea ever. It's like people didn't like, corsets back in the day. Why are they cool now? Um, oh man, those are so bad for you. But yeah, that one's pretty obvious. I don't think anyone would have a problem with that. Obesity causes more deaths than being underweight. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. It's costly, $147 billion each year. They pay more out of pocket than those who are not. Medical costs for people who are obese are $1,400 higher each year. And that affects, I would be curious what the overweight costs are, but start adding up all these percentages. Once you start seeing dollar signs, you might be onto something pretty important. Obesity is, in fact, racist. But so is medicine, too. Certain drugs work differently depending upon your race. You get into blood pressure medications, and I'm sure a lot of others. But that was even like on a House episode. I was like, I don't want the black man blood pressure medication. It's like, dude, this numbers. So anyway, yeah, this could be a cultural thing, could be a poverty thing. Who knows? The food that they make so much better. I would totally even just go off that one fact alone. But, once you have a group of people who are overweight, then you have overweight moms. Overweight moms have more insulin. Overweight moms who get pregnant, the baby's exposed to more insulin. So by the time you have a baby born to an overweight or obese mom versus somebody who is not overweight, they've been exposed to more insulin by, this is again another article I read about. It was like almost by the time they're a teenager or something like that, in regards to the levels of insulin that they've actually been exposed to. And yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's all related. It's the most common in middle age. Okay, that's just okay. Older women are more likely to be obese than older men. Yeah, I think that has to do with the fact that estrogen was pretty protective, and once women lose estrogen, they don't really have testosterone, and they don't have estrogen now. So now older women after menopause. I'm sorry. I am sorry about that. That's one example where I was just like, ah. But hey, you know what? Maybe I'll at one point, maybe I'll start doing a discount for postmenopausal women because hormones suck sometimes. Um, All states have obesity rates over 20%. The South has the highest obesity rates. They also have the best food, okay? Other than New York style pizza, maybe Chicago hot dogs or something like that. Oh, South is so much better. Colorado has the lowest obesity rates. Great. Americans eating more calories than ever before. Obviously. Obese individuals miss more work. Yes, of course. The more overweight you are, the worse you will feel, and the less good you'll feel when you eat food. It's almost like drugs. You keep taking more and more and more, which is totally cool. Like, that's totally true. We just showed you that the hormones that tell you when you're full and stuff and hungry are completely suppressed and you're resistant to them. So the bigger you get, the less impact the food has on you. So maybe the more you have to take in, right? I don't know. Okay, common health conditions related to obesity. Type 2 diabetes. Really hard to be a type 2 diabetic and not be overweight. You can be a type 2 diabetic and not be obese. But another thing that's very interesting is the amount of lean muscle mass you have, like muscle tissue that you have in your body. It plays a huge role in your insulin sensitivity. Muscle controls it a lot. Your blood sugar. Muscle controls your blood sugar a lot, right? So if you yo-yo diet a lot, you lose a ton of weight. The more rapidly and calorically you restrict yourself, and a lot of yo-yo diets don't have a lot of protein in them, you lose a lot of muscle. You lose fat and you lose muscle and you lose water. But then you yo-yo, whap, whap, and you come back up. When you come back up, you gain the water, the fat back, but you don't gain the muscle back. And the more yo-yo diets you do, the less percentage of your total body mass is muscle. Therefore, the less, blood sugar control, insulin sensitivity you have from the actual muscle. Then you can have people like on commercials that they like to hand pick that look fairly not overweight, and they're type 2 diabetics. And again, they could have been overweight. Now they're not overweight, but we just almost never want to say someone's not a diabetic anymore because we just want it to be this chronic lifelong thing that nobody can escape. So you continually take insulin, metformin, and all these other drugs. Heart disease. Yep. When you're overweight, you have heart disease. That's just a fact. Just like most people who have heart disease, almost all of them are overweight, but not everyone who's overweight will have heart disease. It's kind of one of those things. Stroke. Those are all related. Sleep apnea, almost completely, that'd be obstructive sleep apnea. Central sleep apnea might be associated with obesity, but I doubt it. Obstructive sleep apnea, definitely. When you lose weight, your sleep apnea goes away or drastically improves. Maybe you can get rid of your CPAP, BiPAP. I don't know. High blood pressure, yes, that's a very obvious one. Very, very, just associate obesity with all of these things. Liver disease, yeah, fatty liver. Gallbladder disease, yep. Certain cancers, a lot of cancers are associated with obesity because once you get obesity, then you're not just dealing with obesity, you're dealing with type 2 diabetes, heart disease, strokes, apnea. When you get apnea and you reduce oxygen, oh boy, high blood pressure, yep. Liver disease, gallbladder disease, and then you wonder why you might have a cancer increase. It affects everything, people. Everything. Everything. We like to put everything in boxes these days, but we're really everything is intertwined. Everything works together, right? Pregnancy complications. This is a sad one. This one's really sad. This one's really sad. This one's really sad. Had to do a few of those. Super scarring, by the way. Depression. Yeah. There's a lot of positive. You can even be, I don't know how much you want to get into the psychological aspects of it. I should probably do my own video on that. They're huge. There's so many people that wake up every single day and just feel terrible every day. Every day they wake up, they feel bad. And when you feel bad for so long, it's almost like a new normal for you. So you forget what it's like to actually feel good. And then you start making these like nostalgic scenarios in your brain where you're like, oh, that was college. I just felt better because that was college. I had less responsibility. And our body and brain are so good at adapting to these things. We just constantly create new normals for us because that's all our body's just really in our mind. And as a species, we're really good at surviving one way or the other. It doesn't necessarily mean we're living, right? If you want to get all altruistic. But yeah, it's very interesting how rather than taking loads of SSRIs, which I'm by no means saying you should not take an SSRI, granted, there's a lot of antidepressants that cause obesity and overweight. So it's like you're almost creating more problems. Like if you're depressed and not obese, obesity is a risk factor for depression, right? So then you take an antidepressant to control your depression. Now you're overweight or obese, and that could even be a greater risk factor for depression. So it's like, man, it gets really hairy once you start relying entirely on Western medicine in regards to, not acutely dying. If you're really sick or really injured or really dying, Western medicine's really great. If you want to actually live from something, uh, feeling well and good, Western medicine's terrible. Just go into your doctor's office and just play the game. How many people are overweight? Go to a nurse's station and see how happy they are. Some hospitals, totally different. Some hospitals are super cool, and it usually starts all the way up at the top, right? But then you have these nurses who are miserable, which leads to medical students and residents who are miserable. And it probably started with an attending physician who treats them all like crap because he has, a chief of something that treats him like crap, and the hospital administrators treat him like crap. It's like kindness is contagious, but so is just being a jerk. Being, insert whatever four-letter word you want. So how to lower your risk? It's pretty simple. We don't really just. I can't do that one right now. This is interesting though. Weight loss can treat erectile dysfunction. Crazy. Imagine. Let's say 75% of them, or let's say whatever. It's 2/3 of these 30 million men. That's 20 million men who can now have a normal erectile function. They just lost weight. No, we want the blue chew, we want the Viagra, we want all this stuff, rather than just to lose weight. Blows me away. Some fast stats. Leading causes of death: heart disease related to obesity, cancer, we just showed it was related to obesity, accidents. Okay, this is going to sound really morbid, and I want you to know that this is just totally for hypothetical purposes. Take an overweight 65-year-old. He's kind of a really loud breather. He's got a CPAP. He doesn't exercise, desk job. Just kind of has that almost like aura or aroma that kind of is very common in this type of person. The metabolic syndrome, they're overweight, high blood pressure, they're diabetic. Push them down a flight of stairs. I don't know if they make it. Who knows? Take somebody of the same age who exercises frequently. They're not ripped or jacked or on some type of steroid replacement, but they exercise enough. They have bone density, which people who are overweight do actually have a pretty high bone density. But I mean, okay, we're getting in the weeds here. Then push them down that same flight of stairs. Probably get back up and laugh. You know what I mean? They don't fall. You all know that person that if they fell and you all went, oh no, oh no, oh no, are they okay? That should be a wake-up call for everybody that they need to get. Anyway, so accidents and unintentional injuries. I'm not going to say those are caused by obesity, but obese individuals might be at a greater risk of dying from an accident or unintentional injury. Chronic lower respiratory diseases. Yeah, that's probably mostly related to smoking, but once you add smoking and obesity together, you make the perfect storm, which they made a movie about that a while ago now. Stroke, totally related to obesity. Alzheimer's disease and obesity is pretty cool. There's a lot of new stuff on Alzheimer's disease coming out recently in regards to creatine kinase and stuff like that, but I bet you could probably find an association there if you look. Diabetes, 100% association. Nephritis, nephrotic syndrome, and nephrosis, definitely related to obesity. Dying from influenza and pneumonia, if you're overweight or obese, way more likely to die from that than if you're just a regular old person. Not saying you're some super fit, ninja warrior, ultimate ninja warrior type person. Just a regular guy, girl, whatever pronoun you prefer, who goes for walks, goes outside, they're not overweight. Maybe they're not even underweight. I don't know. Maybe they're just a little overweight. Those types of people don't usually die from that. It's really hard. Unless there's some underlying issue that just was subclinical you never knew about. Really hard to die from influenza and pneumonia. And for everybody who's ever lost somebody to influenza or pneumonia, I'm really sorry for your loss. And I hate that medicine likes to just blame that the flu or whatever, COVID, is just this horrible, terrible, terrible, terrible thing, when in reality, it should have been more of a wake-up call, in my opinion. Yeah, some people that seem on the surface to have absolutely no chronic health conditions or underlying issues whatsoever did die. However, maybe this will ever come out, maybe it won't come out. I'm sure that underneath the surface, rather than the tip of the iceberg, these people did have something wrong with them that made them more susceptible to the virus. But in general, dealing with mass, the 99 point whatever survival rate it is, if you just took regular healthy individuals that weren't overweight or obese or had any other chronic underlying conditions, the survival rate would be So yeah, anyway, intentional self-harm and suicide, we just showed that obesity and overweight is a link to depression. It can cause it. There's another link right there. I don't know. I don't know if I want to pull up the top 20 or 30 or 40 list, but it really affects everything. And then lastly, I mean, well, second to lastly, you go into why obesity is and isn't considered a disease. Before you dive into this, when something's actually considered a disease instead of a symptom, the medication for it is a lot easier to get approved, and it can be a lot more expensive, right? Tylenol is pretty cheap. Tylenol is pretty cheap. Certain diabetic medications, not very cheap. I mean, if you get really, I mean, insulin or, thyroid hormones, but once you start getting into the actual drugs to treat diseases, all the different monoclonal antibodies or anything that ends in like umab or something like that, or inib, um, those get so expensive because we have a disease. We have a disease. Diseases are forever. Well, that's what they want you to think. Most of them are forever. So it's forever. We have these amazing medications to treat this disease rather than a symptom. Obesity is just a symptom of your lifestyle. If you have Cushing's disease or something like that with way too much cortisol, the obesity is a symptom of that disease, not a disease in of itself. If you have hypothyroidism and you're obese, it's a symptom of that. If you're diabetic and your insulin resistance is terrible, that's the cause. If you're type 1 diabetic and you take too much insulin than you're supposed to and you're overweight, then it's a symptom of doing that. Calling obesity and maybe overweight, I don't know, but calling it a disease in and of itself is just giving people another crutch to throw their hands up and say, you know what, it's this, I got this disease. Like we want to just claim that high blood pressure is always just this disease. And why like the vast majority, it's like 90% of blood pressure is idiopathic or essential hypertension, meaning that we have no cause, we don't know the cause, but we still don't even really want to address stress. Like in medicine, it's like, oh, be tough, when just reducing stress, sometimes it takes a little while, but just taking some time to reduce your stress, even if what you do to reduce your stress isn't very productive. Let's say it's making balloon animals or something like that, right? The act of taking time to de-stress and relax yourself, that's the biggest kicker. It's not necessarily what you do to relax. It's the fact that you are taking time for yourself, psychologically showing yourself that you are important to yourself. Because how can you take care of other people if you can't take care of yourself, right? Really interesting. So yeah, I know I'm kind of going down a little bit of a side. Money. It's money. Money. They will make a lot more money if it's considered a disease. People will have yet like another one more reason to care less about changing it whenever they just it's a disease, I gotta take my statin, my beta blocker, my ACE inhibitor, I gotta take my metformin, I gotta take my insulin, my glipizide, my sulfonylurea, all these different drugs. And it's like it's just so frustrating to see this cycle perpetuated endlessly. And then I have people tell me that I seem almost condescending, rude, arrogant. And I really don't mean to come off that way. It's just, it gets so frustrating when you see all this. Like, this is just takes like 5 minutes to find all this stuff and just show you guys. It's just so crazy. It's so crazy to me that it would be so easy to solve this whole problem if every single person in the world that is experiencing being overweight or obese did my little free program, not even paying me to be an accountability coach really, and tailoring the program to their lifestyle, which helps a lot. But if they just did, let's say 4 out of the 7 things on my list, oh man, I don't want to throw in, I'd say over 80%, 90% people would eventually no longer be overweight or obese, would be diabetic anymore. Their blood pressure would definitely go down. Their autoimmune conditions would improve the more they experiment with fat. Like this just, wait, okay, last point. Overcoming child obesity, how parents can help or hurt. Yeah, childhood obesity is a huge concern. That's why they don't even call it's type 2 diabetes now instead of adult onset diabetes, because we have so many diabetic kids, right? You get obesity, fatty liver disease. Gosh, man, kidneys, liver, pancreas, all gone. Everything's affected. Look at this. Most physicians do not have the spine to tell the entire family you're all in trouble. You're all going to die early, he says. Any doctor who says that has tenure out the A and is super great job security, because almost every doctor, physician, MD, DO that I talk to feels exactly the same way that I do. They just can't ever imagine opening their mouth because they have so much debt. They'll be fired. They'd be fired, be gone, license done forever, and nobody would care if the organization that did it was even wrong in the first place. That person's disappeared. They're done from medicine. I'm not even really in medicine anymore, so I can kind of say what I want to say. But the fact that that guy said that, he's a very important person. It's really hard to get away with saying that kind of stuff. See, obesity is a medical diagnosis with real consequences, and it's important for the children and families to understand the current and future health risks. It's extremely important. But the information be given in a sensitive and supportive manner. Heaven forbid you actually tell people the truth. I'm all for being empathetic and, having a good bedside manner, showing compassion. But at what point does sugarcoating all of this hurt people more than it helps them? Like, we dance around this, and we have all this body acceptance, fat acceptance, and it's like, oh man, at the core of that, the original, like, feeling good in your own skin, super important. Everybody should feel as confident as they possibly can in their own skin. But then our little horrible subconscious lazy nature of being a sedentary thing that can just survive because evolutionary, it makes sense. Less things you do, the less things are going to kill you. Like, we mutated into this, just like, no, it's totally fine and healthy to be fat. And that's what drives me nuts. And I've seen people struggle with being overweight and obese and the conditions associated with it, and it is heartbreaking. And then you have, rather than like, let's give these people way more options for clothes and everything. Let's not make any aspect of their life more difficult than it needs to be, because they already have enough difficulties just getting out of their handicap space or their hover round or whatever it is. Heaven forbid these people have some form of a daily accountability to improve themselves. And we have physicians saying that they need to be super sensitive and careful because, we don't want to shame people. I'm not saying we should shame people. Telling people the truth is different than shaming somebody. You should be honest with your patients. And most of medicine is not honest. It's half truths, lies even. And you watch House and you're like, man, how could that guy speak? If more doctors spoke like Dr. House did, the world would be such a better place. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. He tells people the truth. And yeah, he's not a real person, but still, people need to hear the truth. It's not like every single person who's overweight or obese walking around is just like this house of cards that can't handle the truth. A lot of people like being told the truth. And as long as you approach it with like in a constructive manner and you come out of a place of compassion, like you care for this person, they receive the information pretty well. And most people thank you for it. Again, not to be too preachy here, but this was my little rant on obesity after that article, a little video log. Hope you guys enjoy it. And stay tuned for more. See you in my live stream, 8 a.m. on Saturday. Take care, guys.